Will having monk fruit, stevia, or other non-nutritive sweeteners increase your risk of getting overweight or having diabetes or eating more? In today's show, we're going to talk a little bit more about a concept known as sensory-specific satiety. There's actually a large dossier of literature suggesting that having stevia or even having monk fruit or other non-nutritive sweeteners cause you to eat less, not more. And I think this is important to untangle because many people are scared of anything like natural flavors or, oh my gosh, stevia, or if I have monk fruit, is it going to cause me to gain weight or eat more? But a large body of evidence suggests no. These non-nutritive sweeteners, and all of them we've talked about with the erythritol story, aspartame, there's ACE-K, there's sucralose, there's a lot of these. All of them need to be looked at individually in terms of their level of benignness versus disease causing. We know that sucralose has a lot of chloride on it and it might disrupt bacteria and so forth in the microbiome. But if we talk about monk fruit or allulose or stevia, the evidence suggests that having these things in small amounts does not cause you to increase your food consumption. It actually might induce satiety and reduce post-meal levels of glucose. So I see so many comments from people like, oh my gosh, I avoid stevia, or whoa, if I have natural flavors, that's going to cause me to derail all of my progress. But there's a lot of evidence that points to the contrary. One paper titled here, Counterpoint, Artificial Sweeteners for Obesity Better Than Sugary Alternatives, a Potential Solution. In summary, this review from Carl Noldowski, Carl and his brother Spencer share a lot of research over on Instagram and so forth. Spencer is internal medicine. Dr. Carl, I believe, is an endocrinologist. He says, interventional data and indirect evidence data suggest consistently beneficial effects on weight and cardiometabolic health, including glycemia, when sugar, sweetened beverages, or other energy-dense foods were replaced by artificial sweetened beverages or artificially sweetened meal replacements. So again, I'm not a huge fan of aspartame or ACE-K because they can be stimulatory from a neurotransmitter standpoint, but things like monk fruit and allulose and benign sweeteners like stevia, not concerned about that. And a large dossier of literature suggests that even aspartame might cause people to consume overall less energy. And so one of the papers we're going to talk a lot about from today is titled Sensory Influences on Food Intake and Control, Moving Beyond Palatability. And essentially what these scientists talk about is the findings from a number of reviews and recent comprehensive meta-analyses of short-term and long-term interventions support the hypothesis that consuming artificially sweetened, lower-calorie foods and beverages in place of equally palatable full energy versions can reduce overall energy intake and promote weight maintenance and even weight loss. So again, I'm sharing this with you because I receive so many comments and questions like, well, Mike, I think having the monk fruit in my coffee is causing me to gain fat. The evidence doesn't suggest that. So if you enjoy having a little stevia in your coffee or monk fruit in your coffee, knock yourself out. If you have an electrolyte solution or a sleep solution or a magnesium powder with a little stevia, it's not going to derail all of your progress. I really think the concern for stevia and monk fruit and allulose is totally overblown. And that's why I want to continue to talk more about this. And why might this be? Why might having non-nutritive sweeteners have a beneficial effect? Well, the scientists say this seems to be primarily because a lack of full compensation for the calories replaced by sweeteners and because people tend to feel similarly satiated having consumed fewer calories as long as taste is unaffected because they have a satiety-inducing effect known as sensory-specific satiety. And that has to do with the fact that when there's a lot of senses when you're having a meal, like if you have some stevia or monk fruit in place of sugar, it seems to induce the satiety mechanisms. I think a lot of people are concerned that if you have a little sweet, it's going to cause you to crave more sweetness, but the evidence doesn't support that if you're consuming a low sugar, low processed food diet. And so that's kind of what I've learned from reading through this sensory-specific satiety research is when people are consuming a lot of sugar, such as having soda pop in the morning, muffins, waffles, donuts, and things like that. A lot of processed sugar that causes people to become desensitized to sugar and actually start to crave more. But when you're having a low sugar diet and you do have a little bit of stevia or monk fruit, that might actually help induce satiety. And so we're going to talk more about that. And the texture of food also matters. And so it turns out that many solid foods are consumed at lower rates. And so the consumption rates do impact this. And I thought this was just quite fascinating. So vigorous chewing and hard foods are consumed more slowly and are consistently ingested in smaller quantities than foods and beverages with softer textural characteristics. So you might be thinking, okay, if you have a piece of steak or eggs or something like that, compared to having a donut or a cookie, a real soft, it basically dissolves in your mouth, that might lend itself to overconsumption and more rapid consumption. And we know that eating rates, if you eat more rapidly, you're more likely to overconsume. And by the time you realize you're full, you've already consumed too much. And so that's why having slower foods, cooking your food from scratch, using the crock pot, the pressure cooker, and stovetop, as opposed to just putting things in the microwave that are pre-made and fully digested. So having harder foods is more satiating and is linked with a 10 to 30% reduction in overall energy. I think that is quite fascinating. Okay. Now, this is a great visual talking about how hyperpalatability and the processing of foods can increase the preference and overeating or overconsumption, leading to weight gain. So this shows, for example, ice cream. It's very soft. It's easily digestible. It's easy to overconsume. Things like peanut butter. I don't know about you, but if I have peanut butter in the house, I'm probably going to eat half the jar in one sitting, right? Because it's just so easy to wolf it down. And we know people on the low carb ketogenic diet, they like to supplement with fats and nut butters and things and wonder why they're not losing weight. Probably it's lending itself to an overconsumptive state. And so the scientists in this particular article say consumption of higher and high-fat foods reshape taste, sensation, and preferences in rodents, humans, and insects, although the strength of the evidence differs across these organisms. These changes could alter the different aspects of food intake, such as compromising the nutritional evaluation of food, meaning that you change your food preferences, and also inhibiting sensory enhancement, satiation, or creating a reward deficit. And I want to get to Stevia in just a moment. But friends, thank you for being here. Thanks for hitting that like button and sharing this as a direct text message if you're enjoying the content. Also, I would love to know what you think about this in the comments below. So please leave me a comment and hit that like button. So we're talking about inducing satiety. One tool that can help you is the Berberine Fasting Accelerator by Myoscience Nutrition. This is a great tool if you are prone to food cravings in the evening. 2 to 3 capsules of berberine is a great way to induce satiety and help to kickstart the mechanisms linked with fasting. So if you're prone, like me, to having cookies or craving ice cream or hyperpalatable foods in the evening, check out myoscience.com. That's MYOXCIENCE.com, myoscience with an X, and check out the Berberine Fasting Accelerator. It can be a great tool to help curb those cravings in the evening and kickstart your fast. You can save using the code podcast at checkout. So let's talk more about Stevia. I think this is a great randomized, double-blind randomized controlled trial titled Stevia Beverage Consumption Prior to Lunch Reduces Appetite and Total Energy Intake Without Affecting Glucose or Attentional Bias to Food Cues. A double-blind randomized controlled trial in healthy adults. So essentially what this study found in 22 different subjects was a beneficial effect and sensory-specific enhancement of a stevia beverage when consumed prior to a meal on appetite and energy intake in healthy adults. And what you see here in these different figures is blood glucose level, because I think the perception is, okay, if stevia, allulose, or monk fruit are sweet, or erythritol, if that's sweet, that's going to trick my body into spiking glucose and spiking insulin. Well, as I mentioned, we have a randomized, double-blind clinical study in humans finding that is not the case. And they used water as a control. They had stevia, maltodextrin, glucose, and sucrose, right? And what they found is a lower post-meal level of glucose compared to having maltodextrin, glucose, or sucrose. And hunger levels also decreased up to 1 hour after the meal, as well as desire to eat. And so I think this particular study and many others should add a little bit of credence and help you have more confidence in deciding whether or not to have a little bit of stevia in your coffee. If you enjoy a little stevia, have it. If you have a little allulose in some yogurt, probably not that big of a deal. I really think that many people are overly concerned about this and sort of tripping over dollars to save pennies when it comes to nutritional changes in their life. And so the scientists summarize here, what they say is the consumption of high sugar and high fat diet reshapes the transcriptome and epigenome of the taste cells and nerves and dulls their responsiveness to stimuli. Sugar levels in the diet also affect taste sensation in humans, but more research is needed to understand the impact of high sugar intake and taste on feeding. So essentially, what the scientists found and what I've read through reading many of these different papers is when you are consuming a diet high in refined sugar, meal over meal for years, your taste receptors become desensitized and it leads to overconsumption. But when you have small amounts of sweet in a non-nutritive sense, that doesn't impact glucose in a negative way. So the take home here when it comes to modifying your life is cut the sugar out of your diet and use these non-nutritive sweeteners sparingly, but they're not going to derail your progress or cause you to unnecessarily gain weight or eat excessive amounts of food or energy. In fact, they might enhance and help to maintain weight loss because they have a satiety-inducing effect, and they also are replacing calories. We know that energy intake is part of fat loss, right? It's hard to lose weight if you're over consuming energy. And when you're constantly consuming sugar, your taste receptors and various aspects of taste and satiety become desensitized, as the authors talk about via epigenetics and the metabolome and transcriptome. So you should replace sugar with, say, allulose, stevia, or monk fruit, or maybe a little erythritol, but not be so concerned that it's going to derail your progress. And I think that's the really important point of this. And so let's finish off with this hallmark study by Wise et al. And they placed human subjects on a reduced sugar diet for 2 months, substituting calories from sugar with fat, proteins, and complex carbohydrates. And the authors found that these individuals had higher intensity ratings for sweetness and also had better sweetness satiety, meaning they didn't need to consume lots of sugar to feel satiated. So other studies have supported this idea, showing that sweet taste and sensitivity is increased when sugar levels were reduced by fasting or calorie restriction in obese subjects. So again, get the processed sugar out of your diet, and it might help you have a greater satiety effect when you do taste sweet. And so the excessive concern, I think, is just overblown when it comes to having allulose, a little erythritol or monk fruit or stevia. And so reducing the simple sugars in the diet actually may enhance satiety and help you in your weight loss endeavors. So I would love to know what you think in the comments. As always, thanks for tuning in. Thanks for sharing this video and hitting that like button, and we'll catch you in a future episode down the road.